Hello and welcome to BioCreates. Here in this lesson, we will discuss the characteristics of living organisms. In biology, we study about living organisms or life. Bio is the life, logy is the study of. So if you're going to study about life or living organisms, we first need to be able to identify or separate living organisms from non-living objects. So here in these lessons, we will see what are the characteristics of living organisms that help us to identify these living organisms. When we take living organisms, we can see a huge diversity among them. Organisms are diverse based on their size, shape, form, and habitat. For example, if we think about the size of living organisms, there are microscopic organisms like bacteria and very big organisms. The size of bacteria is in average 0.25 to 2 micrometers. While if we take an example for a very big organism, giant sequoia, this is the tree giant redwood. It grows up to about 100 meters in height. Then if we take the shape of organisms, organisms have different shapes. For example, we have cylindrical organisms like earthworm, and streamline shape in birds and fish, and various other different shapes in animals and plants. Then if we talk about the form, there are unicellular and multicellular organisms. An example for a unicellular or a single cell organism is amoeba. Then, as the last one, if we take the habitat is where the organism lives. So organisms live in various different habitats. For example, some organisms live in terrestrial environments. For example, rats. And there are aquatic organisms who live in water. Example, all kinds of fish. And there are arboreal organisms. Arboreal means they live in trees. For example, loris. And aerial organisms like birds. So organisms have different kinds of habitats. So this means that living organisms have a huge diversity. Even though they show this kind of diversity, we can identify these living organisms by a certain set of common characteristics. So here in this lesson, we're going to talk about those characteristics that help us to identify them and separate them from other non-living objects. So we will go to the first one, order and organization. So living organisms show an order from molecular level to biosphere. So they are highly organized. This organization pattern helps these organisms to perform their biological activities efficiently. So if you look at this organization pattern, we have molecules at the bottom level. Then organelles like mitochondria, ER, and then we have the cell, then tissues, organs, example the heart, stomach, lungs, and then organ systems, then organisms. I will draw it here because I don't have space here. Organisms form populations, like human population in a certain area, populations, and then different populations form communities, ecosystems, finally biosphere. So living organisms show these hierarchical levels of organization. So this methodical pattern helps the organism to perform in an efficient way. For example, plant leaf or the human eye. These are organs that are highly organized and they are highly efficient in performing their function. Then we will go to the second characteristic, metabolism. Metabolism is the total of all the chemical activities taking place in an organism, all the cellular activities. So we can include all catabolic reactions and anabolic reactions. The catabolic reactions are the breaking down reactions. For example, AB is broken down to A and B. Then the anabolic reactions are the synthesizing reactions. For example, A and B reacts to form AB. So all these kinds of chemical reactions are metabolic reactions. So living organisms have metabolism. They have metabolic reactions. For example, we can take photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is a synthesizing reaction. In photosynthesis, plants fix light energy and synthesize carbohydrates. So that is a metabolic reaction. So living organisms show metabolism. Then we will take the third one, growth and development. So here we have two components, growth and development. Growth is the irreversible increase in dry mass. So for example, When we grow, our body produces more cells. So it is an irreversible increase. We don't go back to our previous size. So that is the growth. But if you take something like an object that absorbs water, then that is not an irreversible increase. Once that object releases that water, then it goes back to its previous position. So we don't accept that as a growth in biology. So here the growth should be an irreversible increase in dry mass. Then our second component, development. So the development refers to the irreversible changes that occur during the lifespan of an organism. For example, a child starts to walk or a child starts to sit. There are milestones in these developmental changes. So this growth and development are two consequent processes that happen in the lifespan of an organism. Then the fourth one, irritability and coordination. So irritability is the ability to respond to stimuli from both internal and external environment. So irritability is actually like the sensitivity. It is the organism's potential to respond to stimuli. So what are these stimuli? A stimulus is a change in the environment, a change in the internal or external environment. This irritability and coordination we can see in all living organisms, both in plants and animals. So in animals, this happens as a result of coordinated efforts of the nerves, hormones, muscles, skeletal systems, the entire system. An example for this in plants is we know that plants grow towards sunlight. So here the stimulus is the light. The plant grows towards that. So that is the ability of this plant to respond to that stimulus. So we can see this irritability and coordination in all living organisms. Then the fifth one, adaptation. Living organisms can adapt to their environment. They show structural adaptations, physiological adaptations, or behavioral adaptations. An example is sunken stomata in xerophytes. Xerophytes are plants that have adaptations to survive in less water conditions, to survive in environments with low amount of water. So they have sunken stomata. So they have their stomata somewhere here, somewhere deep in an internal part of the leaf. So we can see the two guard cells here. So this is the stomata. So there is an air chamber. So that's an adaptation to live in environments with low amounts of water. Then another example is viviparity in some mangroves. That is, in some mangrove plants, their seeds germinate while they are still attached to the maternal plant. Then another example is the splayed out foot in camels. So this is to give them some additional surface area for supporting their weight on sand. Right, then the next one, reproduction. So the organisms have the ability to produce offspring for continuous existence of species. So living organisms give rise to a new generation or new offspring by reproduction, and this is essential for the existence of species. Then the last one, heredity and evolution. So organisms have genes that pass characteristics from one generation to the next. And the changes that occur over time as a result of genetic modifications lead to evolution. So heredity and evolution both are characteristics of living organisms. Living organisms have genes. They pass those genes from one generation to the next generation. You get your characteristics from your parents. So your parents pass their genes to you. So like that, we pass our genes from one generation to the next. And then over time, changes occur as a result of genetic modifications, and then finally that leads to evolution. So these are the characteristics that we can use to identify living organisms. There are some situations that we find some of these characteristics in non-living objects as well. For example, crystals. Crystals grow. That growth is also irreversible in crystals. And another example, waves. Waves move. But there is a difference. These non-living objects show these one or two characteristics, but only living organisms can display all these characteristics at some point during their life cycle. Non-living objects may show one or two of these things, but not all. So as a summary, we can use these characteristics to identify living organisms from non-living objects. So using these characteristics, we can now identify living organisms. And thank you for watching.